when a young girl burst into a hushed courtroom and pointed her trembling finger at the presiding judge. No one believed her at first. But the moment she revealed a small USB drive, her voice echoing through the chamber about murder and secret bribes, everything changed. A powerful figure was exposed, and the entire town watched in shock. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of truth, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for more. The night that set all of this in motion was far from ordinary. Rain hammered down on Willowbrook Park in relentless sheets, pooling in deep puddles that reflected the glow of the dim street lamp. A single towering oak tree stood near the center of the park, its branches swaying in the fierce wind, leaves fluttering like panicked moths around the incandescent halo of a failing lamp. While most citizens huddled indoors, safe from the punishing storm, one man dared to stand in the open. Jonathan Pierce, a powerful and influential figure in the town, known for his immaculate suits, impeccable grooming, and a cold, calculating stare that could freeze the bravest souls in their tracks. That particular evening, he was dressed in a tailored trench coat, the fabric doing little to shield him from the onslaught of water rolling off his shoulders and down his polished shoes. Clutched between his lips was a cigar, barely staying alight in the rain. He glanced at his watch every few seconds, scowling more deeply each time. Rainwater slicked his dark hair to his forehead, and he stood there cursing the storm under his breath, mumbling words about impatience and the utter nerve of whoever had summoned him here. He didn't like to be kept waiting. If there was one thing Pierce believed in, it was that his time was too valuable to waste. In the distance, thunder growled, a low rumble that vibrated through the park's soaked ground. The occasional flicker of lightning painted the world white for half a heartbeat, revealing the stark lines of Pierce's features, a tense jaw, narrowed eyes, and a foul temper simmering beneath the surface. The trees rustled and moaned in the wind, branches whipping back and forth in protest. Pierce pulled his coat tighter and turned his gaze to the path leading from the road, tapping his foot in agitation. At last, another figure emerged from the darkness, holding an umbrella that gleamed under the minimal light. The person's suit was just as pristine, if not more so than Pierce's own attire, and expensive cufflinks flashed with each measured step. Pierce spat out his cigar, crushing the soggy remains under his shoe. His voice sliced through the air, rough and impatient. "You're late," he snapped, arms crossing over his chest. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" The newcomer halted a few feet away, face shadowed by the broad brim of a hat. Rain cascaded off the edges of the umbrella. For a moment, neither spoke, the only sounds being the drizzle and the distant roll of thunder. Then came a soft, low voice, steeled with quiet intensity. "Yes, Mr. Pierce. I know exactly who you are. And we need to talk." Pierce's lip curled in a sneer. "Talk about what? I don't have time for games. I'll have you know." "Spare me," the other person cut in, stepping closer into the glow of the street lamp. "I'm done pretending to be at your beck and call." Pierce's scowl deepened. "You think you can threaten me? I've covered for you, yes, but my patience is at its limit. I want more money, more benefits, more protection. Whatever it is you're doing out there, you can't hide it forever. Keep paying me well, and I'll keep my mouth shut." Silence stretched taut between them, the rain intensifying, as if nature herself held her breath in dread of what might come next. The figure let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You don't know when to quit, do you? You push too hard, Pierce. This arrangement only works if you don't get greedy." "I don't get greedy," Pierce spat. "I get what's owed to me." He stepped forward, water sloshing around his ankles, and jabbed a finger at the other's chest. "You wouldn't dare harm me. Not with all the eyes I have on you." Lightning shattered the sky, illuminating the figure's face for a split second. Fury twisted those features, and the umbrella crashed to the ground, forgotten. In an instant, a heavy wrench appeared in the figure's hand, drawn from beneath the tailored coat in a single lethal motion. Pierce didn't even have time to cry out. The iron connected with the side of his head with a sickening thud. He toppled like a puppet with its strings cut, hitting the pavement face first. Rain splashed across his motionless body as the storm raged on. For a long moment the figure stood, chest heaving, gazing down at the crumpled form in disbelief or shock. The weapon still dripped with blood and rainwater. Then came the frantic realization. The figure looked around, scanning for witnesses, but the park remained deserted. Another peal of thunder masked the sound of the next blow, ensuring Pierce was truly unconscious, or worse. The body was dragged to a nearby trash can, stuffed inside like a piece of refuse. The figure stood over it, panting heavily. With trembling hands, they wiped the wrench with a cloth and slipped it into a small plastic evidence bag. A sardonic smirk curved across their lips, though the expression was tinged with a flicker of nerves, or maybe regret. Another flash of lightning revealed the tension in those eyes. This was no mere theft or extortion or scuffle. This was murder. Under the cover of darkness and relentless rain, the figure rushed away, heading toward the edge of town. The storm washed away footprints and spattered tire tracks, leaving little trace of the violent crime that had just occurred. By morning, Willowbrook Park was back to its deceptively tranquil state, a common green space that families strolled through and joggers circled for exercise. The rain clouds still lingered, resulting in a quiet gloom. A middle-aged woman out for an early run took her usual route past the trash can, then froze mid-stride. A pale hand protruded from the opening, limp and unmistakably human. Her scream pierced the still air, summoning others to gather in alarm. Police tape soon surrounded the area, and the body of Jonathan Pierce was extracted for the entire town to witness. Officer Jordan Barker, a seasoned investigator with a stern jaw and tired eyes, arrived on the scene. Blunt force trauma, he muttered to his partner, turning the corpse over with gloved hands. Definitely not an accident. Shortly after, someone found a wrench lying not far from the body, covered in blood. Officer Barker's partner slipped it into a plastic bag. This was near the trash can. Looks like it has a name etched on it, Daniel Carter. And that was how Daniel Carter's life took a sudden, brutal turn. Daniel woke to loud banging on his front door. He had just pulled an all-nighter finishing a repair job for a local business. As the neighborhood's handyman, he worked odd hours and rarely had much time to himself. Yawning, he stumbled to the entrance, bleary-eyed. "Hold on," he called. When he pulled the door open, he found two officers with grim expressions waiting on the porch. One of them spoke in a flat voice. "Daniel Carter?" "That's me," Daniel replied, trying to rub the sleep from his eyes. "What is this about?" "You're under arrest for the murder of Jonathan Pierce." Daniel's brain stuttered. He blinked once, then twice, sure he must have misheard. "Murder? Jonathan Pierce? I don't understand," he finally managed. "I hardly knew the man. Why would—" "Please turn around. Hands behind your back," the other officer said curtly. The click of handcuffs sealed Daniel's confusion and dread. "I'm innocent," Daniel exclaimed, struggling as they led him away. "I never killed anyone." They escorted him to the squad car, ignoring his protests. Daniel's 7-year-old daughter, Lily, peeked around the corner of the living room, clutching a small teddy bear. Her father locked eyes with her as the officers pushed him into the back seat, heart dropping at the fear on her face. He tried to manage a reassuring smile, but tears already pooled in the girl's wide eyes. The last sight he had before the door slammed shut was Lily standing there, trembling, alone. At the station, they fingerprinted Daniel, questioned him for hours, and paraded the piece of damning evidence in front of him. A wrench with his name on it, smeared with blood. "Your prints are on the handle," Officer Barker said. "Witnesses claim you argued with Pierce a few weeks back about unpaid repairs. We have motive and means." Daniel's mind spun. He remembered that argument. It had been a heated confrontation over a job he completed at one of Pierce's properties, but it ended with Pierce promising to pay eventually. Sure, they had parted on bad terms, but murder? That was unthinkable. Daniel's only crime had been gullibility, trusting that a wealthy man would settle his bill in due time. "Someone must have taken my wrench," Daniel insisted, despair creeping into his voice. "I didn't do it." The detective's stare never wavered. "Tell it to the judge." That judge, ironically, was a man named Judge Whittaker, known for his stern demeanor and apparent dedication to upholding law and order. Daniel initially thought it was a good thing, someone who wouldn't be swayed by sensational headlines or public outcry. He had no way of knowing the darkest secret behind Whittaker's lofty perch on the bench, that the good judge was anything but fair and balanced. Not long after Daniel's arrest, the community buzzed with the scandal. Most people assumed the evidence was irrefutable. A few neighbors murmured that Daniel was a good man and this had to be a mistake, but rumor and speculation spread faster than truth. Soon, the local news stations ran the headline, "Local Handyman Arrested for the Murder of Prominent Businessman Jonathan Pierce." The media seized on it. Wealthy, important victim, small-town everyman suspect. Talk shows, internet comment sections, and radio chatter all asked the same question. Did Daniel Carter snap under financial pressure? Lily Carter was 7 years old, with bright brown eyes and a shy smile, made even more timid by her father's absence. She didn't understand the complexities of murder investigations or the twisted politics that sometimes accompanied them. All she knew was that her daddy was gone, locked behind bars for something he insisted he did not do. She sat in their living room each evening, staring at the front door, hoping it would open and that her father would return. She cried herself to sleep, hugging that threadbare teddy, desperate for reassurance. Sarah Mitchell was a trusted friend of Daniel's. She had known him for years, ever since she hired him to fix a broken fence at her mother's place. Over time, they struck up an easy camaraderie. He always seemed honest and kind, and she admired that about him. When Sarah heard about Daniel's arrest, her heart lurched in alarm. She immediately volunteered to take care of Lily until Daniel's release. After all, Lily's mother had passed away when the girl was just a toddler. Sarah had watched Lily grow up, and the idea of her being alone in the house, father dragged away as a suspect, was too painful to bear. Thus, Sarah moved into the Carter home temporarily, took Lily under her wing, and began scouring the situation for answers. She wasn't a detective, but she possessed an organized mind and an unbreakable resolve once she set her sights on something. First, she reassured Lily. "We'll clear your father's name," she said, kneeling down to the girl's level. "I promise." Lily gave a wavering nod, tears brimming. "I miss him so much. Why would they say Daddy did something so horrible?" Sarah stroked Lily's hair gently. "Sometimes people are quick to judge. But if he's innocent, we'll prove it. You just hang in there." When Lily was asleep that night, Sarah dove into a deep online search about Jonathan Pierce. Pierce's reputation around town was that of a shrewd businessman, a proud investor in local real estate, and a generous donor to certain charities. But rumors abounded that behind his polished exterior lay unscrupulous dealings and under-the-table negotiations. Sarah found hushed claims of extortion, money laundering, and intimidation tactics used to corner small business owners into selling their properties cheap. But nothing she discovered definitively linked Pierce to anything that pointed to his murderer, aside from the fact that he had enemies. Yet there was one name that surfaced frequently in connection with Pierce's rumored misdeeds: Judge Whittaker. Supposedly, Whittaker had been accused of taking bribes in the past to alter legal outcomes in favor of certain powerful individuals. Those rumors were never proven. In Willowbrook, Whittaker was respected, known for his harsh sentences against criminals and unwavering stance on moral issues. On the surface, the man had an impeccable record, spotless as freshly fallen snow. But something about the swirl of rumors and hush money made Sarah's skin crawl. She remembered Daniel mentioning that he was set to appear before Judge Whittaker for the initial hearing. If Whittaker was truly entwined with Pierce's affairs, how could Daniel ever hope for a fair trial? Sarah placed a frantic call to the only professional she trusted to handle sticky situations: Noah Graves, an old contact of hers who had once worked as a police officer before transitioning into private investigations. He was both resourceful and fearless, traits Sarah desperately needed. "Sarah," Noah greeted her after she poured out the entire saga over the phone, "that's heavy. I don't usually handle murder cases, especially ones with a judge possibly involved." He paused, and Sarah heard him sigh. "But for you, I'll see what I can do." "Thank you," she breathed, relief rushing through her. "I have a gut feeling that Whitaker is dirty, but I have no proof. We need to find out if he's behind framing Daniel or if he's just covering for whoever did kill Pierce." Noah asked her to send him everything she'd uncovered, promising to dig deeper. Meanwhile, Sarah managed the household, tried to keep Lily's spirits up, and visited Daniel in jail whenever she could. Each time, Daniel looked more worn, anxiety carving lines into his normally easygoing face. But he tried to remain strong for his daughter. "How's Lily?" he asked Sarah on one occasion, his voice trembling. "She must be terrified." "She's worried, but I'm taking care of her," Sarah assured him through the glass partition. "We're working on a way to prove your innocence." Daniel rubbed a hand over his tired eyes. "I swear I never touched Pierce. All I know is I got a call from his office saying my check would be delayed again, but that's the last direct contact I ever had." "I believe you." Sarah placed a palm against the window. "Hold on a little longer, Daniel. We'll get you out." Time ticked by. The day of Daniel's first hearing arrived. Sarah sat in the courtroom gallery, Lily by her side, clutching her teddy bear as if it were a lifeline. Officer Barker presented the wrench, the forensics, the testimony of a bystander who vaguely recalled hearing Daniel argue with Pierce. Judge Whitaker looked on, expression grave, lips pressed into a tight line as if troubled by the narrative. On the surface, everything seemed routine, just another homicide case. But Sarah watched him closely and noted how his gaze flickered with something else, calculation or perhaps fear. When Daniel's public defender spoke on his behalf, stating that Daniel insisted the wrench had been stolen, that he had no reason to murder Pierce, Whitaker's expression didn't change. He merely shook his head, unpersuaded. A short recess was called, and Sarah ventured out into the hallway. She noticed that Whitaker disappeared into a side corridor with a phone pressed to his ear. She couldn't hear what he was saying over the general din of the courthouse, but something about his hunched posture and tense, whispered voice sent a chill through her. Noah called her that evening with an unsettling discovery. "Sarah," he said, "I found large wire transfers from Pierce's business accounts to an offshore account associated with Whitaker. The amounts are staggering, and the timeline suggests that Pierce was funneling money to Whitaker for some reason. Maybe hush money, maybe bribes. I don't know yet." "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. She stepped away from Lily, who was coloring in the living room, to speak privately in the kitchen. "So that confirms Whitaker's corruption, right? It's not 100%, but it's certainly strong evidence that Whitaker had motive to be rid of Pierce if something went sour between them. I also uncovered references to hush payment. Pierce might have threatened to go public or cut Whitaker off. If that's true, Whitaker had every reason to kill Pierce or have him killed." Sarah's thoughts whirled. If Whitaker was the orchestrator, then framing Daniel would be an easy way to point suspicion elsewhere. "We have to prove Whitaker did it," she insisted, heart pounding. "We have to find something definitive." Over the next few nights, Sarah and Noah pored over digital trails, financial records and phone logs, all while pretending to live life as normal so as not to tip anyone off. Sarah stayed alert, jumped at every shadow. Lily sensed the growing tension too, though the girl didn't fully understand it. One night, Sarah woke to find Lily crawling into her bed, trembling. She had nightmares about her dad being locked away forever. Sarah held her, whispering reassurances. 2 days before Daniel's second court appearance, a crucial hearing that would likely seal his fate, Sarah got a phone call from someone she didn't know. It was a man's voice, deep and threatening. "Stop digging," he growled. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." The line went dead before she could respond. She told Noah about the call, fear coiling in her stomach. "They know," she whispered. "They know we're on to them." "Then we have to move fast," Noah said. "I'm going to get definitive evidence that ties Whitaker to the murder." His break came soon after. He managed to intercept a voicemail from Whitaker's personal line to an associate. In it, Whitaker's voice hissed, "If you ruin me, I'll ruin you first. Don't forget who's truly in control here." This seemed clearly aimed at Pierce. In the background, there was an audible scuffle, a sound of metal hitting something. It was short but incriminating. Noah assured Sarah that this was the last puzzle piece they needed. A direct threat from Whitaker to Pierce that preceded the murder. Sarah's hands shook when Noah played it for her the first time. "This is it," she said. "He basically threatened Pierce. He's incriminating himself." Her plan was simple: present the recording at Daniel's next hearing. But Whitaker was cunning. Someone must have informed him that Sarah possessed damaging evidence. Late that evening, while Sarah was finishing up final preparations, she and Lily left Noah's office with the precious evidence on a USB drive. The sky was dark, clouds obscuring the moon and stars, the air cold enough to bite at the skin. Sarah noticed them too late. Two men standing by a parked car, their silhouettes ominous in the faint glow of a distant street lamp. The moment she realized they were there, they advanced. One man lunged, knocking Sarah to the ground. The other grabbed Lily by the arm, yanking her away. "Run!" Sarah screamed at Lily, her voice cracking. She fought to free herself from the attacker pinning her to the wet pavement. But the man was strong. He pressed a fist to her jaw, a blow that stunned her. "Give us the evidence," he growled through clenched teeth. Lily, wide-eyed with terror, managed to bite the second man's hand and wriggle free. She stumbled forward, trying to flee. Just as she called out for Sarah, a sharp blow clipped her head, dropping her onto the pavement. The last thing Sarah saw through blurred vision was Lily crumpled beside her, the child's eyes rolling back before she lost consciousness. They searched Sarah's bag. They found her phone, rummaged for the USB. But unbeknownst to them, Sarah, fearing just such an ambush, had tucked the USB in the inside pocket of her jacket instead. Moments later, sirens flashed at the end of the street as a patrol car turned the corner. The attackers panicked and fled, leaving Sarah and Lily unconscious on the ground. The policeman found them, called an ambulance, and soon they were rushed to the hospital. Late that night, a furious Judge Whitaker sat in his office, pacing. An assistant delivered the news that Sarah Mitchell had been attacked, left in critical condition, and Lily Carter was also injured. Whitaker permitted himself a small, tight smile. "Well," he muttered, "that should keep them quiet." He had no idea the USB drive still existed, nor did he know that Lily Carter was not so easily broken. The next morning, Lily woke in a hospital bed, her head bandaged. She felt groggy, her entire body sore. Memories collided in her mind, shouting, her father's face behind bars, the men who attacked them, Sarah lying on the ground. She blinked, adjusting to the bright, sterile lights. Immediately, she whipped her head to the side, ignoring the dizzy spell that followed. Sarah was in the adjacent bed, unconscious, a thick bandage wrapped around her head. "Sarah," Lily whispered, voice trembling. She slid off her bed, nearly falling. A nurse bustled in, alarmed to see her standing. "Miss, you need to lie down," the nurse cautioned. "My father's hearing," Lily pleaded, her voice cracking. "Sarah has something. She has evidence that proves my dad is innocent. It's in her jacket." The nurse frowned, uncertain. "Honey, you should rest. You have a head injury. You don't understand." Lily's eyes brimmed with tears. "He's innocent. He's going to prison if I don't bring that evidence. Sarah told me about it. She would never forgive me if I let my daddy be locked away." Moved by the child's desperation, the nurse nodded slowly. "Wait here. I'll see if they brought her belongings." Minutes later, she returned with Sarah's jacket. Lily's hands shook as she rifled through the pockets. Her heart soared in relief when her fingers closed around a tiny USB drive. It was the same drive Sarah had shown her, telling her, "This is our proof." "I have to get this to court," Lily said. The nurse glanced at her phone, biting her lip. "I can't leave my shift," she murmured. "Let me call someone." "Stay right here." Not long after, an older man named Frank, a retired policeman who volunteered as a driver for hospital patients in dire need, entered the room. He crouched down, meeting Lily's gaze. "I heard you need a ride somewhere important," he said, voice gentle but firm. "I used to be a cop, sweetheart. I'll keep you safe." Lily's throat tightened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, cradling the USB in her palm like the most precious treasure. 15 minutes later, Lily was in Frank's car, her head throbbing but her mind laser-focused on one thing: saving her father. The ride to the courthouse felt both interminably long and heartbreakingly short. She couldn't stop thinking about Sarah lying in that hospital bed or the look in her dad's eyes when they hauled him away. She wasn't sure how she, just a 7-year-old girl, would do this, but she had to try. Sarah had risked everything for that evidence. Lily wasn't going to let that go to waste. At the courthouse, the clang of Frank's car door sounded impossibly loud. Lily sprinted up the stone steps, ignoring the stares of passers-by. She nearly collided with an armed guard at the main entrance but scrambled around him, clutching the USB. Inside, Daniel's trial was already in session. A hush fell in the gallery as the prosecutor finished summarizing the case, painting Daniel as a man who had lost control, consumed by rage or desperation for money. The jury's expressions were grave, leaning toward guilt. The defense attorney stood, looking exhausted. "Your Honor," he began, His words were drowned out by the loud thud of the courtroom doors flying open. All heads whipped around. Standing in the doorway, drenched in sweat, her face bruised and pale, was Lily Carter. She walked in slowly, eyes bright with fierce determination. Her dress was wrinkled, and a white bandage circled her head, but nothing about her posture suggested defeat. "Stop," she called, her small voice quivering but resolute. "My dad didn't do it. Judge Whittaker, he did it. He killed Mr. Pierce." A ripple of shock coursed through the room. Daniel, in his seat at the defendant's table, stood abruptly, heart pounding. "Lily," he breathed. "What are you?" She held up the USB drive, tears filling her eyes. This is proof. They hurt Sarah to get it, but I didn't let them." She looked so small standing there, the massive, ornate courtroom dwarfing her. Dozens of eyes focused on her, including Judge Whittaker's. His face turned stony, fury flickering behind his mask of calm. The defense attorney, awakened from his stunned silence, rushed over to Lily, gently taking the USB. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "It's from Sarah," Lily said. "It has a recording. Mr. Noah found it. It proves that Dad's innocent." Judge Whittaker banged his gavel once, his voice tight. "We do not permit theatrical interruptions in my court. Remove the child." But the prosecutor, visibly intrigued, interjected, "Your Honor, the presence of new evidence in a murder trial is no small matter. We must at least examine it." The defense attorney wasted no time. He plugged the USB into his laptop, asked for permission to play the audio, and, after a tense moment, the bailiff set up a speaker. Lily's frantic heart hammered as the file started. There was crackling, muffled voices, then Pierce's distinct tone, arrogant, angry, saying that if Whittaker threatened him one more time, he'd reveal everything. Then came Whittaker's unmistakable retort, "If you ruin me, I'll ruin you first. Don't forget who holds real power here." A sharp noise followed, metal striking something, and then the recording cut out. The courtroom erupted into gasps and murmurs. Daniel's attorney looked up, triumphant. "Your Honor, you can clearly hear Judge Whittaker threatening Mr. Pierce. This goes hand in hand with financial documents linking him to Pierce's accounts. It appears the Honorable Judge had both motive and opportunity to commit or orchestrate this murder, then conveniently oversaw the trial of an innocent man to maintain the cover-up." The gallery was in chaos. Journalists scribbled notes or filmed the spectacle. The members of the jury exchanged wide-eyed glances. Judge Whittaker's face was ashen, but he struggled to maintain composure. He hammered the gavel again. "This is an outrage," he roared, though sweat beaded on his brow. "We will recess." "I refuse to." A new group of figures filed into the courtroom. Federal agents. One stepped forward, brandishing a badge. "Judge Whittaker," the agent said, voice echoing in the stunned silence, "we have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the murder of Jonathan Pierce, along with charges for corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to frame an innocent man." Whittaker shot to his feet, eyes blazing. "How dare you? I am a judge. You have no right." But the agents seized him. The hush that descended on the courtroom was nearly suffocating as Whittaker was marched out, handcuffed and red-faced, shouting of conspiracies and defamation. The reporters followed, hungry for more footage. Daniel stood rooted in place, tears streaming. Lily, trembling from adrenaline and pain, looked toward him. "Daddy," she whispered. He rushed to her, ignoring court protocol, and enveloped her in a hug. "Lily," he breathed. "I can't believe you did this. You saved me." She let out a sob, clinging to him. "I couldn't let them lock you away. I know you didn't do it. Sarah, she gave me the chance. She's still in the hospital, Dad. They hurt her." Daniel cupped her face in his hands. "Sure, it's okay. We'll see her as soon as we can. I promise." The new judge assigned to the case wasted no time dismissing the charges against Daniel. The entire fiasco collapsed. A swirl of interviews, statements, and official procedures followed as the local district attorney's office scrambled to clear Daniel's name and salvage their reputation. The news cycle pivoted from local handyman murder suspect to corrupt judge tied to businessman's murder exposed by brave girl. A whirlwind of relief and gratitude enveloped Daniel, but his first priority was visiting the hospital. His exoneration happened so swiftly that by the time he left the courthouse that afternoon, news vans were already parked outside, and reporters thrust microphones in his face. "How do you feel?" they asked breathlessly. "What will you do next? Will you press charges? What do you think of Whittaker?" Daniel, drained and holding Lily's hand, murmured polite responses. "I just want to see Sarah," he repeated like a mantra. "We owe her so much." They arrived at the hospital that evening. Lily still wore her hospital bracelet. The doctors had insisted she be monitored for her head injury, but she'd signed herself out against their advice, determined to save her father. Now, they both stood at the doorway of Sarah's room, hearts pounding. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, eyes closed, but the steady rise and fall of her chest signaled life. An IV drip was attached to her arm, and a bandage covered half her forehead. The rhythmic beeping of machines filled the otherwise quiet space. Lily let go of Daniel's hand, rushing forward. She leaned over the bed, tears forming. "Sarah? Sarah, it's me. Wake up. Daddy's free. We did it." Daniel approached, eyes wet as he saw the bruises on Sarah's face. "She was so brave," he whispered, taking her hand gently. "We couldn't have done it without her." For a moment it seemed Sarah slept too deeply to hear. Then her eyelids fluttered and she stirred. A soft groan escaped her, followed by a raspy exhale. Slowly, her gaze traveled the room, as though trying to figure out where she was. Recognition flashed when she saw Lily and Daniel. "You're here," she whispered. "Thank goodness." Lily nodded furiously. "We are. And you're going to be okay. Right, Sarah?" Daniel squeezed her hand. "I'm out, thanks to you and Noah." Lily got the USB to the courthouse just in time. A faint smile curved Sarah's lips. She tried to speak, coughed, and cleared her throat. "That little girl is a hero," she murmured, voice still weak. The hush in the room spoke volumes. They all knew the danger, the near misses, the cost of exposing Whittaker's corruption. Daniel felt a wave of guilt and gratitude. "I owe you my life," he said quietly. "And Lily's sense of hope, too." Sarah's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion evident. "We did the right thing," she whispered. That's all that matters. She drifted back to sleep, but her fingers curled around Daniel's in a gentle squeeze. The next few weeks were a blur for Willowbrook. Whitaker was indicted on multiple charges, each more shocking than the last: money laundering, homicide, racketeering. Prosecutors uncovered a network of collusion with Pierce and several other shady individuals. The revelations rocked the community. Cases once overseen by Whitaker were reopened for review, and some innocents, wrongly convicted, found fresh hope. Public trust in the legal system took a heavy blow, but there was cautious optimism that rooting out the corrupt judge meant real change could happen. Noah Graves testified about the voicemail, the financial records, and his attempts to protect Sarah and Lily. The story of a little girl's courage captured national headlines, shining a spotlight on the sleepy town. Interview requests poured in for Lily, but Daniel shielded her from the media as best as he could. "She's just a child," he said firmly, turning down sensational talk shows. "She's been through enough." Sarah recovered slowly. She remained in the hospital for nearly 3 weeks. Each day, Daniel and Lily visited, bringing fresh flowers or homemade snack. Lily would chatter about the small joys in life, or new things she learned at school. She insisted on finishing her school year despite the gossip that swirled around her. Other kids asked her questions about the murder case, some with wide-eyed fascination, others with cruelty. But Lily stayed strong. She had faced something bigger than any bully, after all. One afternoon, as Sarah was finally alert and mobile enough to sit upright, Lily handed her a bundle of daisies. "They're from the park," the girl said shyly. "They're the prettiest ones I could find." Sarah beamed, tears glistening. "They're beautiful." "Thank you, Lily." Noah visited too, arms crossed and leaning against the hospital wall with his usual casual air of competence. "Gave us all a scare, Sarah," he murmured. "You're tougher than I gave you credit for." "Thanks, I guess," she replied, rolling her eyes at him. "Couldn't have done this without your detective work. You're not so bad yourself." News of Whitaker's sentencing came swiftly. In a landmark decision, he was given life in prison without possibility of parole. During the sentencing, the new judge solemnly declared that Whitaker's betrayal of the public trust was inexcusable. The crowd erupted in relief and applause when the final gavel fell. Meanwhile, Noah's investigations helped bring down several key associates of both Whitaker and Pierce, cleaning up corruption that had festered in the county for years. Daniel, now officially cleared of all charges, tried to rebuild his life. But it was not easy. He found some of his old customers wary about hiring him again, not through malice but because his name had been plastered everywhere in connection to murder. To pay bills, he picked up small repairs wherever he could, focusing mostly on loyal neighbors and friends. Yet each day, he returned home and saw Lily's bright smile, reminding him that no matter the hardships, at least he wasn't waking up behind bars. Lily, for her part, was just happy to have her dad back. She still dreamed about the men who attacked her, about hearing the echo of the wrench clang on the pavement. But the nightmares lessened with time and therapy. Sarah's presence, once she left the hospital, added a sense of security. Sarah continued to stay with them for a while, partly to help with Lily while Daniel got back on his feet, partly because she felt safer in the Carter household. She couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness lurking behind Pierce and Whitaker's dealings might not be fully extinguished, though the evidence suggested all major players were now in custody. One late afternoon, as spring began to bloom in Willowbrook, Lily came home from school with a bright grin on her face. "They asked me to read my essay in front of the class," she announced. "I wrote about bravery." Daniel laughed. "Bravery, huh? Sounds like you have some first-hand experience." She nodded seriously. "A little." In the essay, she mentioned no names, no explicit details of the horrifying events she'd witnessed. But her teacher noticed the heartfelt words about facing fears to protect someone you love. It made the teacher tear up. Indeed, Lily had changed, no longer just a shy child, but someone who understood the price of silence and the power of standing up for what was right. Sarah settled onto the porch swing, a place she found soothing in the evenings. "Any news from Noah?" she asked Daniel, sipping a mug of tea. Daniel shook his head. "Last I heard, the FBI was finishing up loose ends. Whitaker's behind bars for life. Some other officials are being investigated. I think that chapter's over." Sarah let out a slow breath. "I'm glad," she said, though a shadow crossed her eyes. She rubbed her shoulder, still sore from the assault that night. "You know, sometimes I think about how close we came to failing, how they almost took that USB from me." Lily was the one who stepped up. Daniel stared out into the yard where Lily played with a jump rope, her laughter carrying on the breeze. "She's braver than I ever realized. I owe her so much." Sarah turned to him, a tender warmth in her gaze. "You owe her your freedom. And she owes you for teaching her to be the kind of person who stands up for what's right." They both watched Lily for a while, the sun dipping below the rooftops, painting the sky in pink and orange streak. This simple moment felt precious, a testament to survival and new beginnings. Eventually, Lily noticed them looking and bounded over, breathless. "Let's do something fun tomorrow. Can we go to the park?" Daniel's eyes flickered with recollection. Willowbrook Park was, ironically, the place where this nightmare began, the place where Pierce was killed. But maybe it was time to reclaim it. "Sure," he said softly. "We can pack a lunch, have a picnic." Sarah smiled and set her mug aside. "Count me in." The next day dawned bright and mild. Though the ghost of tragedy still hovered over the place, Willowbrook Park regained some of its tranquility. Families strolled along the winding pathways. The chatter of children rose from the nearby playground. Birds flitted among budding tree branches. Daniel, Sarah, and Lily found a quiet picnic table near the pond. There, they spread out sandwiches, fruit, and a small celebratory cake Sarah had baked. Lily tore around, delighted to feed a few crumbs to the ducks paddling at the water's edge. Daniel breathed in the fresh air, heart lighter than it had been in ages. He turned to Sarah. "Remember how we said this would be the first place we'd come when it was all over? I thought it would be a while yet, but here we are." Sarah nodded, letting the park's ambience wash away the last of her anxieties. "We're free," she said softly and then smiled. "And we're together." At that moment, Noah Graves appeared, walking down the path in a casual button-down shirt and jeans, looking out of place given his usual businesslike demeanor. "Got room for one more?" he asked, holding up a small bag of snacks. Lily jumped in excitement. "Noah, of course." She patted the bench. "Come sit. We're celebrating normal life." He gave a short laugh and joined them, presenting sour candy for Lily, who squealed in delight. For a moment, they all sat there as if no tragedy had befallen them. Just friends sharing a peaceful afternoon. Eventually, conversation drifted to trivial things. A new movie, how to fix squeaky cabinets, jokes about Noah's newest detective job. It felt surreal yet wonderfully, blissfully ordinary. As the sun dipped lower, Lily hopped off the bench. "Let's walk by that big oak tree," she urged. Daniel felt a twinge of hesitation. He knew that was near the very spot Pierce had been attacked, but Lily seemed determined. So they accompanied her, strolling over the gentle slope. The oak tree stood tall, older than any building in Willowbrook, its thick trunk scarred from decades of storms. Lily ran her hand across the bark. "Look, it's rough," she said, "but it's still standing." Sarah glanced at Daniel. "A lot like us?" Noah quietly nodded. "Indeed." They circled around, the path leading back toward the pond. Lily looked at Daniel with solemn eyes. "Dad," she began softly, "now that it's all over, do you think about him? About Mr. Pierce?" Daniel paused. This was the first time Lily had asked about the victim directly. He sighed. "Sometimes. He was a troubled man, I guess, with secrets we didn't know. It's tragic it ended the way it did. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Lily nodded, clearly wrestling with complex feelings that were beyond her years. She took Sarah's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Sarah smiled, though her throat felt tight. "You saved your dad, Lily." "I just helped a little." But Lily shook her head with a child's direct honesty. If you hadn't believed him and done all that work, none of it would have mattered what I did. You're our family now, whether you like it or not. Laughter bubbled among them. The sincerity in Lily's words tugged at their hearts. Even Noah looked touched, glancing away to hide a rare show of emotion. Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling a semblance of peace wash over him. This was what they fought for, a chance to be together, to stand in the sunlight without fear. After a while, they found themselves back at the picnic table. The day wore on, golden light bathing them, and the conversation shifted to future plans. Jobs, school, everyday tasks. Sarah teased Noah about his detective work. Daniel mentioned wanting to start a new project with a local community center, and Lily simply listened, content that her world was no longer weighed down by injustice. When evening arrived, they packed up their belongings. On the way out, passers-by recognized Daniel, gave friendly nods or timid waves. One older woman even patted Lily's shoulder, congratulating her on being so brave. Lily managed a small, polite smile. She still had trouble processing the attention. As they headed toward the parking lot, Daniel carried the picnic basket while Sarah held Lily's hand. Noah walked a little ahead, scanning the surroundings out of habit, ensuring no hidden threats lurked. But everything was calm. The harsh chapter that began with a thunderous storm in Willowbrook Park had ended on a kinder note, the park now just a park again, a place for families and quiet reflection. They climbed into Daniel's truck, Lily nestling in the back seat. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, absorbing the final rays of the sun. Noah waved goodbye, promising to swing by later in the week to discuss another potential case he was investigating. Daniel started the engine, and as they pulled away, the sense of closure settled over them like a warm blanket. Life would never be exactly the same after all they had endured. The trauma would not vanish overnight. The nightmares would occasionally return for Lily, for Sarah, even for Daniel. But they had forged a bond that would last. They had proven that truth, determination, and the unwavering love of a child could topple the highest, mightiest walls of corruption. And for Willowbrook, the scandal had shaken the system, prompting reforms. New officials vowed transparency. The public demanded accountability. A few days later, Sarah moved back to her own home, but she promised Lily she would visit often. True to her word, the next afternoon she came by with groceries, a bright grin on her face. Lily dashed to the door, hugging her tight. "Dad's working on Ms. Mitchell's roof tomorrow," the girl announced excitedly. Then she giggled. "Wait, you're Ms. Mitchell, so that's your roof, right?" Sarah laughed, ruffling Lily's hair. "Right. Guess I've got to keep your dad busy." Daniel poked his head around the corner, holding a toolbox. "Got the call from the roofing company that some tiles needed replacement. I'll handle it cheap for you, since you basically saved my life." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Don't you dare. I'll pay you double, no triple. Some things are worth paying for properly." Daniel pretended to be stern. "No freebies, no special deals. We'll figure it out." He winked at Lily, who giggled. In small ways, day by day, they resumed normalcy. Lily returned to school full-time, though her teacher took her aside to gently ask if she wanted to talk about anything. The local library set up a reading corner in recognition of the importance of bravery and truth, using Lily's story, with her permission, as a testament that even the youngest voice should be heard. Meanwhile, the last vestiges of Whitaker's network unraveled. Lesser players in the corruption scheme made plea deals, revealing the lengths to which Whitaker would go to secure power. Investigations branched out into other counties. It seemed Willowbrook had become a catalyst for a statewide reckoning, shining a light into the darkest corners of the judiciary and law enforcement. In the midst of it all, Daniel found solace in repairing, building, and tinkering. He took on a pro bono project fixing up an abandoned playground in a lower-income part of town. Lily sometimes accompanied him, carefully handing him tools or painting benches in bright, cheerful colors. Sarah volunteered for local committees that aimed to restore trust between the community and the legal system, offering her experience as a cautionary tale. Noah became a minor celebrity among local activists, occasionally giving interviews about how private investigators work behind the scenes to expose corruption. One evening, after finishing the playground repairs, Daniel locked up his truck and sat down on the swing set, gazing at the newly painted slide. Lily hopped on the swing beside him, pushing off gently. The sun cast long shadows across the dusty ground. "Dad," she said softly, "are you happy now?" Daniel paused, letting the chain creak. "I'm getting there," he admitted. "It still hurts sometimes to think about what almost happened. But I have you. I have Sarah. I have my life back. So, yes, I'm happy." Lily studied him, brow furrowing thoughtfully. "I'm happy too," she said, then kicked off the ground, swinging a bit higher. "I just get scared sometimes that something bad might happen again." Daniel reached over, gave her swing a gentle push. "Bad things will always happen, sweetheart," he said, "but we face them together. And we learned that we can stand up for ourselves. That's a powerful thing." She nodded, her eyes distant. "Sarah told me that's why we need friends. If we were alone, it would have all gone wrong." He didn't disagree. "That's exactly right. People who help us believe in ourselves, who fight for us when we can't fight alone." That night, they returned home where Sarah waited with dinner. The three of them ate a simple meal: pasta, salad, and a bit of leftover cake from the fridge, chatting about their day. Lily regaled them with a story of how she taught a friend at school to do a handstand, and Sarah mentioned a petition to expand library funding. Daniel felt a moment of pure contentment, observing the two people he cared about most. The quiet hum of the fridge, the clink of utensils, the smell of tomato sauce. This was everyday life, something he'd never again take for granted. Eventually, the day arrived when Sarah felt strong enough to move around as if none of her injuries had happened. She insisted on tackling chores without help, though Daniel still hovered protectively. One afternoon, she said, "You know, it's funny. A few months ago I was just living my life, working my job, seeing you guys occasionally. I never imagined we'd become this. I don't know, family unit." Daniel considered her words. "A family forged in crisis," he mused. "Sometimes that's the strongest kind." She smirked. "Just don't think you can boss me around because of it." They both laughed, a warmth in their gazes that hinted at a bond deepening beyond friendship, though neither was ready to label it. Lily, though, with a child's uncanny intuition, saw how they looked at each other. She just smiled to herself, content to see the two grown-ups in her life caring so deeply. Time passed in the gentle way it does in small towns, with events measured by potlucks, local festivals, and changes of the season. The leaves turned gold and red, then dropped, rustling across the sidewalks. Winter brought frost, and children bundled in puffy coat. Spring returned, unveiling green grass and blossoms. Each time, Willowbrook Park was there, a silent witness to everything that had transpired, a place that had once harbored a terrible crime but now saw picnics, games, and the simple joys of daily life. On the first anniversary of Pierce's death, the local news ran a retrospective piece. They interviewed Daniel briefly. He spoke solemnly of the need for fairness, the heartbreak of false accusations, and the bravery of those who risked everything to stand for truth. Lily watched her father on the screen, eyes shining with pride. Sarah took her hand and squeezed it gently. The final verdict: Whitaker's life sentence remained in effect, with no chance of release. Pierce's estate was settled, with some of the money going toward restitution for those he had wronged in the community. Daniel received a modest settlement from the city for his wrongful arrest, enough to let him breathe a bit financially and invest in his small handyman business. He upgraded his tools, fixed up their home, and took Lily on a short vacation to the mountains, where they spent a weekend in a cabin, gazing at the stars without any worry. Lily's life stabilized. She slept better, her nightmares fewer and farther between. She stayed in therapy for a while, learning to process her trauma and channel it into resilience. Sarah, too, found ways to handle her lingering sense of vulnerability. She joined a self-defense class and invited Lily to watch sometimes, hoping to teach the girl that it was never too early to learn how to protect oneself. The confidence that sparked in Sarah's eyes was something Daniel admired. A few times, he joined them, not wanting to be left out of the new ways they bonded. Eventually, the day came when Sarah announced, over a simple dinner, "I think I'm going to buy a house of my own." She looked meaningfully at Daniel. "Near yours, though. I can't imagine living far from you and Lily." A pang of something flickered in Daniel's chest. He recognized it as a blend of relief, gratitude, and maybe something deeper. "We'd love that," he said softly. Lily's grin sealed the deal. Within a month, Sarah found a charming little fixer-upper less than a 10-minute walk away. Daniel spent countless weekends putting in floors, repainting walls, and repairing plumbing, smiling at each new improvement. One bright afternoon, Lily darted out of Sarah's front door, trailing laughter. She raced up the street, Daniel and Sarah strolling behind her. The houses were quiet, a typical afternoon hush. Daniel said quietly, "We didn't come out of that trial unscathed, but we came out stronger." Sarah nodded, slipping an arm through his. "Yes," she agreed. "And I'm grateful." They watched Lily skip along the sidewalk, carefree again. The sun warmed them, and they both smiled, letting the contentment of the moment fill their hearts. In the end, the darkest nights had given birth to a sunrise of hope, forging unbreakable bonds among Daniel, Lily, Sarah, and even Noah. They had confronted corruption, faced violence, survived betrayal. They had risked everything for the truth. And now, Willowbrook stood as a testament to their victory. They would never forget the savage storm in Willowbrook Park or the thunder of that fateful night. But they pressed on, cherishing the quiet days filled with healing, laughter, and a renewed belief in the goodness they could create around them. It was a life worth living, shaped by a sense of justice and an abiding faith in one another. Though life would never be the same, they moved forward with newfound hope and resilience, determined to live in a way that would make Avery proud. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already and subscribe for more.